3:40 in the morning, June 19, 1940, the Royal Mail ship Niagara is steaming through the Hauraki Gulf off the coast of New Zealand. She is a massive 13,415 gross ton steel-riveted liner. She carries 349 souls. But her most critical passenger is locked in the bullion room deep within her hull. 590 bars of gold. This is payment from the Bank of England to the United States for munitions that are keeping Britain alive in the war. The value is astronomical. The secrecy is absolute. But the ocean is full of traps. Without warning, the dark water erupts. A violent concussion slams into the hull near the forward holds. The ship shudders as a column of water blasts upward. Before the crew can assess the damage, a second explosion strikes. The Niagara has not hit a reef. She has sailed directly into a kill box. The German auxiliary cruiser Orion has been busy. In the silence of the previous nights, the raider sowed a field of 228 contact mines across the shipping lanes. These are not sophisticated acoustic or magnetic weapons. They are simple, brutal machines of denial. A contact mine is a submerged sphere of buoyancy anchored to the seabed by a cable. It floats at a preset depth, waiting for a hull to brush against it. The mechanism of detonation is a masterpiece of simple lethality. Protruding from the steel sphere are several soft lead horns. These are the Hertz horns. Inside each lead horn sits a glass vial filled with acid. When a ship impacts the mine, the steel hull crushes the soft lead horn. This mechanical deformation shatters the glass vial inside. The acid drains down into a dry battery, activating the chemical pile instantly. The battery surges with current. The detonator fires. The main charge explodes. This sequence happens in a fraction of a second. The result is a massive, expanding gas bubble that hammers the steel plates of the ship. Water does not compress. Steel does. The pressure wave punches through the hull plating as if it were paper. For the Niagara, the damage is catastrophic. The forward holds flood instantly. The weight of the entering water drags the bow down. The ship loses her longitudinal stability. She begins to pivot forward, lifting her propellers out of the water. The evacuation is disciplined. The crew launches 18 lifeboats in the darkness. All 349 people escape with their lives. But the ship herself is doomed. At 5:32 in the morning, less than 2 hours after the first impact, the Niagara slides beneath the surface. She does not stop at the harbor floor. She descends into the true dark. She settles on her port side at a depth of 400 feet. In 1944, 100 feet is not just deep, it is a different planet. It is a region of the ocean known as the dead zone for salvage. Standard military divers in hard hat gear operate comfortably at 100 feet. They can push to 200 feet for short durations if the conditions are perfect. Beyond that, the physics of breathing compressed air turn fatal. The gold is now sitting on the bottom of the sea, protected by 226 remaining live mines and a depth that kills human beings. The Bank of England has lost 8 tons of bullion in a single morning. The war effort requires that money. The logic of the era says the gold is gone forever. The technology to reach it does not exist. The physics of the ocean have claimed the prize. The engineers on the surface are left with a simple, impossible geometry. The target is 400 feet down. The pressure is crushing, and the enemy has mined the only road in. In 1940, Salvage has a hard ceiling. Standard hard hat divers can live and work around 100 feet and sometimes push toward 200. Niagara lies roughly double that depth. Down there, compressed air does not merely limit a man, it disables him. The job is impossible with a human body exposed to the water. The first enemy is the weight of the ocean itself. At sea level, the atmosphere presses against the human body with 14.7 pounds per square inch. We do not feel it because our internal fluids push back with equal force. But water's heavy. For every 33 feet of descent, the pressure increases by 1 atmosphere. At 400 feet, the pressure is approximately 180 pounds per square inch. This is a crushing force. It acts on every square inch of a submerged object. On a diving suit, it attempts to squeeze the air out of the folds. On the human body, the danger is not the chest crushing outright, but the fact that breathing gas must be delivered at the same pressure as the surrounding water. Otherwise, the lungs cannot inflate. The lungs must be inflated with air pressurized to 180 pounds per square inch just to stay open. This leads to the second and more insidious killer. Nitrogen narcosis. The air we breathe is roughly 78% nitrogen. On the surface, nitrogen is an inert gas. It enters the lungs and leaves without interacting with our metabolism. But under high pressure, the density of the gas increases. The nitrogen dissolves into the bloodstream and saturates the fatty tissues of the brain. At depth, this inert gas transforms into a potent anesthetic. Divers call this effect the rapture of the deep. It attacks the mind with the same symptoms as alcohol intoxication. The rule of thumb in the diving world is the Martini Law. It states that every 50 feet of depth is equivalent to drinking one dry martini on an empty stomach. At 100 feet, a diver might feel a mild buzz and a loss of fine motor control. At 200 feet, he is drunk. At 400 feet, the diver is effectively 8 martinis deep. He is chemically incapacitated. He may offer his air hose to a passing fish. He may forget to breathe. He essentially becomes a useless, staggering drunkard in a lethal environment. This is the dead zone. In 1940, there is no mixed gas technology available for commercial salvage. The only tool available is the standard hard hat diving dress made of canvas and rubber. To send a man in a rubber suit to 400 feet is to sentence him to death by physics. The location of the Niagara presents a paradox. The gold is there. It is intact inside the bullion room, but it might as well be on the moon. The water acts as a perfect shield. It denies access through pressure and chemistry. To get the gold, the salvors must find a way to place a human intelligence at the bottom of the sea without subjecting the human body to the wet environment. They must separate the man from the pressure. The engineers looking at the charts realize that traditional salvage is impossible. They cannot swim down, they cannot walk on the deck, they cannot touch the hull with their hands. If they are to recover 8 tons of gold from the crushing dark, they must rewrite the rules of engagement. They need a vessel that can float above the target and a machine that can keep a man alive where the ocean wants him dead. But before they can solve the pressure equation, they have to solve the access problem. The ocean has one more defensive layer waiting for them. The minefield that sank her is still active. Why would a salvage crew sail a rotting steamer directly into the same minefield that just destroyed a luxury liner? The answer is a calculation of acceptable loss. In 1941, the British Empire is starving for resources. The gold is essential, but the ships required to get it are scarce. The Admiralty cannot spare a modern destroyer or a dedicated salvage tug, so the syndicate turns to the scrapyard. They find the Claymore, an aging coastal steamer, rotting and close to the breakers in Auckland. She is rusted, leaking, and forsaken. The salvors patch her hull fire, up her boilers, and declare her fit for duty. If she hits a mine and sinks, the Navy loses nothing but a pile of scrap iron. This crumbling vessel is the platform from which the engineers intend to challenge the Pacific Ocean. The crew takes the Claymore out to the Hauraki Gulf. They know the coordinates of the sinking, but the ocean floor is a vast, featureless plain. To find the wreck, they must physically sweep the seabed. They trail a heavy steel wire in a long loop, dragging it through the mud, hoping to snag the superstructure of the Niagara. But the sweep wire does not discriminate. It catches anything standing proud of the bottom. And the bottom is seeded with 228 German contact mines. The inevitable happens quickly. As the Claymore steams her slow grid, the sweep line pulls tight. For a moment, the crew hopes they have found the wreck. They have not. They have fouled a live mine. The mine's mooring and the sweep warp draw the weapon up until it is terrifyingly close to the salvage steamer, reported as within a foot of her bottom. A single mistake, a single hard touch, and the operation ends in a white flash. So they solve it the only way salvage engineers ever solve anything, by turning panic into procedure. Johnstone is sent down to secure the mine so it can be cleared without detonating. Later, another mine is sent to bump the hull, proof the field is still alive and the road in is still armed. Only after that do they resume the sweep. Eventually, the sweep wire hooks something that does not float. It is a massive, immovable obstruction on the seabed. The sweep finally snags something that does not move. Steel on steel, they mark the position. They have found the Niagara. The Claymore drops her anchors, positioning herself vertically above the target. The search is over. The surface threat has been managed. Now they must look down into the water column and face the engineering impossibility of the dead zone. They have the location, but they still have no way to reach the deck. The engineers decide to ignore the laws of biology. If the human body cannot withstand the pressure of the deep ocean, then the human body must be removed from the equation. They do not send a diver into the water, they send him into a tank. The solution is the observation chamber. It is a simple, rigid steel cylinder just large enough to hold one man standing upright. It is capped with a heavy lid and studded with thick glass viewing ports. Inside this steel shell, the air remains at surface pressure. There is no compressed gas. There is no nitrogen saturation. There is no decompression schedule. A man can drop to 400 feet, stay there for 6 hours, and be hauled up instantly without his blood turning to fizz. John Johnstone is the man who volunteers for the chamber. He is an Australian diver with nerves of iron. He climbs into the narrow steel coffin. The lid is bolted down, sealing him inside with his own supply of oxygen and a carbon dioxide scrubber. He is lowered over the side of the Claymore on a single steel cable. As he descends into the blue gloom, the water pressure builds against the outside of the chamber. But inside, Johnstone is breathing easy. He is effectively in a submarine made for one. He arrives at the wreck of the Niagara. He can see the rivets on the hull. He can see the debris field. But he cannot touch a single thing. He is a prisoner in a glass and steel bubble. He has no arms outside the chamber. He has no tools. The only connection he has to the world of action is a telephone line running up the cable to the surface. This introduces the concept of directed grabbing. It is a problem of geometry and communication. On the deck of the Claymore, 400 feet above, a crane operator sits at the controls of a massive steam winch. Hanging from the crane is a giant mechanical grab. It is a steel claw weighing several tons, lined with teeth. The crane operator is blind. He cannot see the wreck. He cannot see the grab. He is steering a wrecking ball based entirely on the voice of a man buried in the ocean. Johnstone watches through his thick glass window. He sees the grab descending through the twilight. He speaks into his headset. He tells the surface to swing left. The crane operator slews the boom. The grab swings like a pendulum in the current. Johnstone waits for the momentum to carry the claw over the target area. At the exact moment the heavy steel jaws hover over the right spot, he gives the command to drop. The operator releases the brake. The grab plummets down, smashing into the wreckage. Johnstone orders the jaws to close. The teeth bite into the ship. He orders the lift. The grab rips free, tearing away twisted metal and debris. This is a surgery performed by telephone. The parallax is extreme. The time delay between the command and the action is critical. Johnstone must anticipate the swing of the cable and the drift of the current. He is threading a needle with a 1-ton hammer. Over the course of 1941, John Johnstone and his brother William make more than 300 descents in the chamber. They spend hundreds of hours suspended in the dark. The risk is binary. If the cable snaps, the chamber will plummet to the bottom. If the seal fails, the water will jet in with the force of a hydraulic cutter. If the grab swings wild, it could crush the observation bell like a tin can. Through this slow, painstaking coordination, they clear the debris. They rip away the railings and the boat davits. They expose the skin of the ship. They have established a line of sight to the bullion room. But the gold is still buried under 3 decks of armored steel. The grab can tear loose debris, but it cannot punch through the structural plating of a liner. To get inside, they need more than a claw. They need to apply brute force with surgical precision. Explosives are a blunt instrument. When the target is soft, gold bullion hidden behind hardened steel plating, the use of high-velocity dynamite becomes a delicate paradox. The engineers need to tear the ship apart to reach the treasure, but they cannot use enough force to vaporize the prize. They are attempting to crack a safe with a mortar round while keeping the contents intact. The technique they develop is a form of ballistic surgery. They work methodically, opening access in stages, blast, clear with the grab, reassess, repeat. The concept involves peeling the ship open layer by layer. The Niagara lies on her side, so the decks are now vertical bulkheads. To reach the bullion room, the team has to fight through layers of hull plating and internal decks, opening the ship section by section until the strong room is finally exposed. After that, it becomes a brutal loop. Charge, back off, blast, then let the grab peel away whatever the explosion loosens. Meter by meter, they carve a path toward the strong room. This work is complicated by the cargo manifesto. The Niagara was not just carrying gold, she was carrying munitions. Niagara also carried small arms ammunition in her holds. As the crew blasts deeper, they treat the wreck like an armed magazine, because shock and heat can trigger dangerous secondary effects in wartime cargo. Down in the steel bubble, Johnstone hears the terrifying sound of the war coming alive. After the main blasting charge detonates, there is a secondary crackling. The heat and shockwaves set off the rifle rounds. Thousands of bullets cook off underwater, creating a storm of miniature explosions. The diver sits in his chamber listening to the ship machine gun itself. He must wait for the popping to cease before he dares to guide the grab back into the hole. Day by day, they chew through the ship. They blast through the promenade deck. They rip through the upper cabins. Finally, they expose the bullion room itself. It is a fortified cage deep in the ship's belly. The door is heavy steel, locked and barred. They place a final charge. The explosion blows the heavy door off its hinges. The path is open. The grab descends one more time. Johnstone calls the shots. He steers the iron teeth into the mud and wreckage of the strong room. The jaws close. The crane strains against the load. The grab rises through 400 feet of dark water. It breaks the surface and swings over the deck of the Claymore. The crew watches with bated breath. The jaws open, dumping a pile of black, stinking mud and twisted metal onto the deck. A crewman steps forward with a fire hose. He blasts the mud away. There in the slurry amidst the wreckage, something glints. It is a rectangular bar of dull yellow metal. It is dented and scarred but unmistakable. It is the first bar of gold. The impossible equation has been solved. The minefield did not stop them. The depth did not crush them. The grab has reached into the heart of the dead zone and pulled the treasure back to the world of the living. The salvage of the Niagara is a race against geopolitical time. By late 1941, the Pacific Ocean is no longer just a shipping lane. It is becoming a battlefield. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor transforms the region into an active war zone. The risk of keeping a stationary target like the Claymore anchored in open water becomes unacceptable. The operation is forced to close down. But the manifest of recovery is staggering. Recovery is, in the face of enemy mines and crushing pressure, the team has performed a miracle of extraction. By the time the Claymore weighs anchor for the final time in 1941, the crew has recovered 555 bars of gold. They have reclaimed 94% of the lost bullion. They have proven that the dead zone of the ocean is no longer off limits to human ingenuity. The wreck is left alone in the dark for 12 years. The 555 bars go back into the vaults of the Bank of England to fund the war effort. But the ledgers show a discrepancy. 35 bars remain unaccounted for, buried somewhere in the mud and twisted steel of the bullion room. In 1953, the British salvage firm Risdon Beasley returns to the site to finish the job. The technology has evolved. They bring a new vessel and a more advanced observation system known as the Iron Man. This is an articulated suit with robotic limbs, allowing the diver more flexibility than the rigid steel bubble of 1941. But the fundamental physics remain the same. The pressure is still 180 pounds per square inch. The depth is still 400 feet. The 1953 operation is a forensic cleanup. Using the directed grabbing technique refined a decade earlier, the new team sifts through the debris field. They recover another 30 bars of gold. These stragglers had been missed by the first sweep, hidden under the silt or trapped in the wreckage. The condition of the recovered gold tells the violent story of the salvage. These are not the pristine, smooth ingots that left the bank vault. Many of the bars are deeply scarred and gouged. The soft, yellow metal bears the distinct, heavy indentations of the steel teeth of the grab. These marks are the fingerprints of the operation. They are physical evidence of the blind brute force required to snatch the treasure from the bottom of the sea. When the final tally is done, the numbers are historic. Out of 590 bars carried by the Niagara, 585 are recovered. Only 5 bars remain lost to the ocean, likely driven deep into the sediment by the force of the explosives. The salvage of the Niagara remains one of the greatest feats of deep water engineering in history. It was not achieved with computers or submersibles. It was achieved with steam-powered dynamite and a telephone line. It proved that with enough courage and enough geometry, there is no depth that can hide a fortune. The floating death of the minefield and the crushing weight of the water were neutralized not by fighting them directly, but by understanding their rules. and building a machine to survive them. The gold was lost to the physics of the planet, but it was recovered by the logic of the engineer.